you so much. Marcy, would you like to do roll call?
Sure. Okay, good morning. I will do roll call with council members first, and we'll start with Melissa.
Thank you. Council Chair, Committee Chair here.
Thank you. JJ?
Morning, everyone. JJ, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Vijay?
Good morning, committee member.
Good morning. Kelly?
Here. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. And Monica?
Monica, Chair of the Grant Committee.
Thank you, Monica. And then we'll start with staff next. John?
John Myers, Executive Director.
Jason?
Jason, Research and Communications Specialist.
There's Jason. Okay, good morning, Jason. And then Michael?
Good morning, everyone. Michael Leva, Contracts and Grants Coordinator.
Thank you. Lonnie?
Good morning, Lonnie St. Cyr, Fiscal Manager.
And Sarah?
Good morning, Sarah Roof, Communications Director.
Okay, back to you, Melissa.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to agenda item B, our minutes review and approval from January 17th, 2025. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? I'm hoping yes. Do we have any questions, comments, or changes that we need to make to the minutes as written? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call for a motion to approve the minutes for January 17th, 2025 as written. Do I have a motion?
Sorry, Melissa, this is Kelly. When I was reading it, there was an extra T somewhere that wasn't needed. If I find it, I'll send it to you, but I can motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. I missed that.
I'll
Okay,
send it.
thank you, Kathy. All right, so if we find the extra T, let's correct it. Otherwise, we'll approve the minutes as written. Do I have a second?
This is Bijat.
JJ second.
Bijat? Okay, thank you. Sorry, JJ. Bijat beat you to it. Thank you, Bijat. All those in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Anyone not voting? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Minutes are approved. All right. Agenda item C, our fiscal contracts update with Lonnie. And God bless you all staff, by the way. Lonnie, this budget thing right now. Okay.
Yeah, so let's start with the notes. So the council received a total allotment of $1,501,328 for fiscal year 2023.
Lonnie, can I interrupt you? Can you make this bigger somehow?
Better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The council has fully obligated these funds. A no-cost extension for the period of performance has been granted and now runs through September of this year. There's approximately $16,595 remaining to be liquidated of these funds. Going on to fiscal year 2024, the council has received a total allotment of $1,500,684. The obligation and project periods are through September 30th again of this year. There is approximately $633,155 remaining to be liquidated. These are the funds being used for the current 2025 work plan projects. Now, going on to fiscal year 2025, I've added a column here. So the council has received $676,694 for the fiscal year 2025 funding. Congress passed another continuing resolution running through September 30th of 2025. However, there were no budget tables tied to this continuing resolution, so we are unsure of the total award amount we will actually be getting for 2025. The budget sheet again shows both an estimate at level funding, which is what we've been continuously told we will receive. But again, no budget table, uncertain. And now the actual amount of what funds we have been awarded. So should we get level funding, there's a good chance that we may need to find additional projects to fund. And should we receive no additional funding other than what we've received, we're looking at needing to make some cuts. And there's a possibility of anything in between here. And to make matters a little bit more challenging, there's 2 restraining orders on our existing awards. So that's going through the courts and has not been resolved yet. We currently have not been notified of any difficulties in spending the awarded funds that we have. There were some initial issues early on in January when the restraining orders were being placed. But so far, the invoices that I'm processing are being paid. So that's a good thing. I think John has heard some councils having difficulty accessing their funds. Arizona currently doesn't appear to be in that situation, but again, we'll see what happens. Any questions on this sheet? And there's going to be further discussion. I think that there's another additional agenda item to kind of discuss possible contingencies of funding levels that may happen. But for the purposes of this sheet, any questions? Okay, hearing none, moving on to the next sheet. I know it's going to be really small, but for you to be able to kind of see everything, these are all the projects funded by the council. Staff is currently reaching out to grantees to get a better idea of what they are anticipating spending, if they plan on spending their entire award amount, if they plan on things being left over. Trying to get invoices in so that they can be processed as timely as possible. So, yeah. Any questions on this sheet? Okay. Finally going on, and again, I apologize for the silence here. But yeah, this sheet has been updated to reflect the projects that we're anticipating for the fiscal year 2025 and 2026 work plans, as well as the funding that has already been approved in the prior years. The funding is generally the year prior to the project year. So right now, we're using 24 funds to pay for the projects that are happening in 25, and this 25 funding amount is what we were anticipating to spend in 26 projects. And again, this is what you guys have seen previously. It's what we were estimating at level funding, to where there's a slight surplus here that we need to fill in that hole should we get level funding. Should we get a slight cut, we're okay. We could make that cut with no major issues. Should we get no additional funding, we're going to have to figure out where to cut things. Any questions on this sheet? I hear a beeping.
It's JJ.
Lonnie, this is JJ. So just to clarify, when you say level funding or less, you're talking about the 25 funds that were approved by Congress, but you all are contemplating that we might not receive those or receive less than those. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
So
okay.
They did do the continuing resolution, but for us, there were no budget tables associated with it. So we really don't know what that continuing resolution amount is. So that's still up in the air for us. It could be level funding. It could have nothing tied to it. Again, we don't know. So worst case scenario, there's nothing tied to it. But yeah, let's hope that that's not the case.
Right. Yeah,
Again,
no, I appreciate
and I don't know if on your end there were budget tables linked to your continuing resolution.
So for the P&As, no, there haven't. So we're kind of in that same wait and see, but we've been verbally told that it's the same levels, but until we see what's deposited, then that happens when we get the NOA. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify so the other council members know. We know because we're in the same boat, but I wanted to make sure folks were hearing that correctly, because obviously publicly you hear about a continuing resolution at level funding, but we don't know exactly what that number is yet either. So I just wanted to make sure other council members do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the additional clarification. Yeah, until I see something in writing, I'm not going to say it's level funding. But again, yes, we've been told, and yes, we've kind of planned that out as level funding. We have some room should it be less than level funding, and if we do not receive any additional funding, you know, cuts are going to have to be made. But at this point, it's a big unknown. And unfortunately, we were hoping to get our award letters, you know, mid-April, late April. Unfortunately, for those that are unaware, ACL, which the councils used to fall under, has kind of been dismantled. And the financial staff, as far as I know, were part of a reduction in force. So there's now a further delay in getting those continuing resolution award letters out. They're now expecting at the earliest mid-May, is what we're hearing on our end. So, you know, we probably will continue to be in this state of unknown for at least another month. Again, not sure what you're hearing on the P&A and you said side of things, but that's kind of where the councils stand.
Just real quick, this is JJ. We're hearing the same. So mid-May is what we're being told, and all the reasons you've heard is the same reasons we've heard for the delay. So I just wanted to say we're hearing the same message.
Okay, thank you, JJ. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for me for now.
Okay, Lonnie, thank you so much. John is going to speak to that budget in a little bit. I just want to let staff know, you know, John and I are staying in touch. We met again yesterday afternoon to discuss kind of everything that's going on with reorganization at the federal level and the funding as well. And I just want staff to know how much I appreciate each and every one of you and how much our council does too. I know that this is a really stressful time. There's so many unknowns, but we appreciate what you're doing and trying to do and figure it out and work under some really rough conditions. And I am so grateful that we've got you on our council as too. So thank you for what you're doing and trying to do to kind of keep our ship going. So thank you. Okay, John, agenda item D, our executive director report, sir.
All right. Well, strap in, everybody. There's a lot to talk about today. Thank you all for being with us. Appreciate you as council members investing your time in this work. It really is important. And as I said, there's a lot to go over. So first of all, let me start with some official news from boards and commissions. Within the last month, both Vijet Sari and Raina Sims, who's with Division of Aging and Adult Services, have been formally appointed with the submission of their loyalty oaths. They are formally appointed to the council. So two more individuals kind of out of the way. Welcome. Glad to have you on board. Raina was a new appointee who took over for actually somebody who was with us for about 10 minutes and whose name I can't remember, but successor to the DOS representative. Vijet has been on the council for a while. This was a renewal, I believe, of Vijet's first term. I have also spoken with somebody new at boards and commissions about the remaining vacancies we have. As you're probably aware, JC Farkas, who is our Sonoran Center representative, a mandatory USAID representative, we're still waiting on her appointment. It's been a year and a half, and that is still logging its way through the process. We're also still waiting on Jeffrey Studer, who's going to be our Department of Education representative, also a mandatory slot. Both of those have been in process for quite a long time. I finally was able to speak to somebody at boards and commissions who said she will make sure that those are moved forward. They were listed in their system as needing to be approved, and for whatever reason, no action was being taken. We also have two other individuals, Leanne Fuller and Justin Harris, who are community members and have been recommended for appointments, and no action. We recommended them last fall. No action had been taken on their part. They weren't even flagged in the system despite a written message from me to boards and commissions. So it sounds like I'm dogging on boards and commissions, and I sort of am, but the reality is they're understaffed and overworked, and at least now I've gotten the ear of somebody who has assured me that things will start to move, and I'll stay on top of that. But the immediate news is we're grateful to have Vijette and Reina officially appointed or reappointed to their positions. The next item is with regard to the Department of Economic Security. As you know, the council is under the umbrella of DES. That is, DES is what's known as our designated state agency. DES is going through a bit of a reorganization right now. I wouldn't say it's massive, but maybe it is. All I know is we were notified earlier this week that the council, which is formally aligned within DES as part of the Division of Business Services. There are lots of different divisions within DES. The Division of Business Services is the one that we have been reporting to for a few years now. We are being moved from DBS to the Office of Community Engagement. And the Office of Community Engagement is led by Leah Landrum Taylor. Some of you may know her. She was a legislator in Arizona for a long time. She is an Arizona native, has been very involved in public policy, in community work, community organizing, a whole variety of things, is well respected and leads a team in OCE that is pretty closely aligned in many respects with the work we do. They have a person on staff who's responsible for outreach and communication around developmental disabilities. They have somebody on staff who has a similar position focusing on early intervention, and they work with the health plans, they work with access, they work with DDD. So it's a good alignment, I think. Melissa and I will be meeting, have a very brief meeting with Leah late next week to just kind of get acquainted, and then I'll be setting up time for our entire staff to meet with Leah and or her designee to kind of go through some of the transitional things that need to be taken care of and get questions answered and so forth. But I think it's going to be a smooth transition. We are staying within DES. We're just moving to a different office there, and with any luck, everything will go very smoothly. Any questions regarding that? Okay. Regarding, oh, hey, Kathy. Kathy, I was just mentioning that that we were notified earlier this week that the council is being moved from the Division of Business Services to the Office of Community Engagement within DES. So we're staying within DES, but OCE is going to be our, I guess, sort of our parent organization from this point forward. It's part of, I think, a larger DES reorganization, and it seems to make a lot of sense. It's a little better aligned with the work we do and the work they do. So we're moving forward with that. You've probably been hearing a lot about funding for DDD, and the issue of a huge DDD shortfall has been in the news for months now. There's been a lot of advocacy around it. There's been a lot of political jockeying back and forth between the legislature and the governor's office. And earlier this week, there were hearings in both Senate appropriations and House appropriations related to a funding bill that would fill the gap of roughly $122 million that DDD needs to get it through the current state fiscal year. It is being relayed to the public that unless they get this money, they will run out of funding at the end of April and not be able to pay vendors and providers to continue providing services. to individuals who rely upon DDD. Excuse me. So, with a figure that large in a state like Arizona, you can imagine that nothing's going to come easy, and it certainly has not come easy. The House and the Senate Appropriations Committees are controlled by Republicans. The governor's office is controlled by a Democrat. Both sides are trying to score some points. Both sides have, in various respects, slowed this process and made it much more political than anybody would like it to be. So nobody's without blame here. The long and short of it, I guess, is that identical bills passed through the Appropriations Committees on Wednesday. One of those is likely to be adopted by the legislature as a whole and passed on to the governor. What's important about these bills is that not only would they provide the money, the $122 million that DDD needs for this year, they would also place some pretty severe restrictions on access and DES with regard to how DDD operates moving forward and how Medicaid waivers and other state plan amendments are applied for through CMS and received through CMS. So basically, the legislature wants to control when and how waiver amendments and state plan amendments are submitted to CMS. They don't want it to be purely a department or administrative function. They want it to be a legislative function moving forward. From our perspective, from my perspective anyway, this is dangerous because the legislators are not experts on this work. They do not know the nuances. They've proven this time and time again this session. They do not understand the nuances of how the DDD system works or how DD services are provided. And this is just a recipe for more bureaucracy and just disaster when it comes to managing our Medicaid system. So that's a personal perspective. I think it would be wrong of them to do this, but both of these bills passed. Both of them include these restrictions. They also, in order to meet the $122 million need, would be drawing funds from the state housing trust fund, from various other funds that require the money. There's a prescription rebate fund that uses money from that fund to fund healthcare projects and other projects. There are 3 or 4 different large funds that would be essentially drained in order to cover the shortfall, and that would be disastrous for those entities that rely upon that money. So Democrats, as you might imagine, they voted unanimously against the proposals in the House Appropriations, and I apologize, I'm getting kind of inside baseball here, but in the House Appropriations Committee, the bill would not even have passed because enough Republicans were voting against it, except the chair of House Appropriations added 3 more Republicans to the committee just before the hearing. So he got his measure passed by 1 vote. It was an 11-10 vote because 3 Republicans voted against it. So there's a lot of dissent around this. The governor has said she will not sign it because it has too many restrictions. Again, political jockeying going on back and forth. But what it all means is if something isn't passed within the next 12 or 13 days, DDD will not have money to pay providers. So apparently there are negotiations going on. There is no final settlement on this. And the governor yesterday announced that she's putting a moratorium on any further bill signing until this issue is settled. So all the bills that she is receiving from the legislature right now are just going to sit on her desk until the legislature and the governor's office come to a resolution on DDD funding. This is more attention to DDD than I have ever seen in my time working in this field, which granted is not as long as some of you, but the amount of advocacy, the amount of parent advocacy, caregiver advocacy, provider advocacy is just kind of overwhelming. And I think many legislators are feeling that as well. They are getting a lot of heat, and hopefully everybody will come to their senses and come to a resolution. It's also important to point out that a Republican on the House Appropriations Committee submitted an amendment to the bill on Wednesday. This is a Republican who worked across the aisle to get this compromise amendment crafted and then submitted, and that was rejected by the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. So a bill that probably would have met with the governor's approval was killed because the appropriations chair was not willing to cede any of the the territory, I guess, that he was claiming on this bill. I think you probably all are aware of it, and I've talked way too long about it, but Kathy, looks like you have a question or a comment.
So could you remind me, are services still being provided? Nothing has been stopped, correct?
Nothing has been stopped, and it's anticipated that nothing will be stopped before
Okay.
April 30th. But as of May 1st, they're telling us DDD will not have the money to pay anybody to provide services.
Wow. Okay. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
John,
And if I can just add to that, there are some providers that have quit already because they're worried about their own, livelihoods. So they quit, and then
Well, that's what I was hearing too, and I was kind of worried about that because it felt like some services were already stopped and not being provided. So.
Yeah, there is some. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so that, thank you, Jason. That's a really important clarification. Formally, no services have been ended except for those providers that have stopped providing them. And DDD has asked providers to continue providing services past May 1st with no guarantee that they're going to get paid. Which you can imagine is kind of a non-starter for a lot of people, a lot of organizations. They just don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
thank you. That's what I was going to ask you to add. And I don't know many providers that have that kind of money in reserves if they're servicing a lot of clients and have a lot of staff to pay. You're asking your staff to possibly work for free, which is just simply not reasonable. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jason. Hey, Kathy.
Okay, so I'm happy to answer any other questions about that, but I think probably everybody on the call has a pretty good sense of where things stand, and we'll keep you informed or you'll read it in the news as things change. But nothing more likely to happen this week. There may be some movement on it next week. Beyond just that, the legislative session has been pretty active. There are a couple of issues that we've been working on or taken a position. I've sort of taken a position, or we're not allowed to take position on particular bills, but there are several bills. There were several bills introduced this year related to school safety planning and taking into account the needs of students with disabilities during school safety plans or school emergency plans. Those are moving through the process. Representative Matt Gress has been a sponsor of some of those. I think Selena Bliss, another Republican legislator, has sponsored a couple of those bills, and those seem to be moving forward. They are not perfect bills. They are, they're not going to do everything that we would hope they would do, but at least they are starting to take into account the needs of students with disabilities, and that's good. There are a couple of kind of worrying bills, I guess, related to work requirements for SNAP recipients or work requirements for access recipients. We're kind of watching those. In my opinion, the governor is unlikely to sign those bills, but they are probably going to land on her desk. We'll see how that goes. Couple of other things to note. Ava's Law. Senate Bill 1106, am I right, Melissa?
Yes. And Miranda was
Okay.
the main sponsor on that, and she's been amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
It's a bill that passed through but was vetoed last year. Some changes have been made, and it's likely to land in the governor's office again this year. This is a bill that would hold public entities and primarily schools liable for failing to do adequate background checks on employees if those employees are prosecuted for sexual assault or sexual violence against students or other forms of abuse against students. This originated with a family here in the Valley whose daughter was sexually abused by a school employee over a period of a fairly long time. When it came to light that the school had not done adequate background check on that individual, the young woman's mother worked with legislators to get a bill introduced, and there was a sense that some of the requirements last year were too onerous on schools and school districts, so it was vetoed by the governor. But again, changes have been made, and it looks like it has a very good shot of being signed this year. It would be a major step forward in protecting children, students in particular, from abuse at the hands of school employees. Melissa, I think, is much more familiar with the bill than I am. If you'd like to say anything, Melissa, certainly.
Well, I'm really happy. I can tell you the mom because she's been very public about it. In fact, there was just another interview that was on TV the other night. Gretchen Jacobs is a lobbyist and a mom of a daughter, a nonverbal daughter, Ava. I think David just turned 21, and we've been friends for a whole lot of years. In fact, she was one of the main forces behind Stephen's Law Autism Insurance. But what happened to Ava was pretty horrible. And in the case of the school, when the perpetrator was actually seen by another teacher abusing Ava, when the parents went down to the school and spoke with the principal's first words were, "We knew." We knew. I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot. They hired a PI and all kinds. They found a lot of other victims, the family, and investigations. And the previous school had let him go rather than disciplining him. He had been abusing children there, and I went to his court hearing, and he specifically said how much he loved these kids, and his attorney talked on and on about it, and they were all nonverbal. And the judge's face and our faces, that he chose to work with this special population, and we're all like, yeah, because they couldn't tell on you. Anyways, it's been hard. Concessions were made in that bill, but it really is everything that Gretchen wanted it to be. Senator Miranda actually publicly spoke that she was actually a victim of sexual abuse when she was in the public school system as well as a young girl. So if there's one tiny little bright spot in our legislation this year, I'm really happy. And we'll see if Hobbs signs it. She should, we hope, but not until this budget issue is solved. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, as everyone knows, the issue of sexual violence against people with disabilities had been something at the top of our list since even before the Hacienda incident. Erica instituted a terrific program bringing community members and other organizations together, and we've carried that forward. We continue to fund programs in that area, and so to see this kind of progress on the legislative front is very, very encouraging. The last bit of legislation that I want to mention, well, I'll say two things. First, throughout the legislative session, I've done a couple of updates and a couple of update webinars for people. I did one at the beginning of the session. I did one sort of midway through during crossover week, and I'm going to be doing another kind of wrap-up session after the session ends. Whenever that is going to be, we don't know because there is no state budget yet. But once we know everything, we'll do a wrap-up session to talk about the key legislation that went through this year. That'll probably be in May or June. But last bit of legislation I wanted to mention, and I'm probably going to ask JJ to chime in on this, is Senate Bill 1356, which relates to a group home monitoring program that has been in place for a couple of years now that Disability Rights Arizona oversees on contract with the state. And Representative Tim Dunn, who worked with Jennifer Longden when she was still in the legislature on various programs to protect vulnerable adults, he's the sponsor of the bill. I apologize, JJ, I honestly don't know where that bill currently stands, but it sounded like it was moving through the process to get the program reauthorized. Is that correct?
It is. So thanks for the question, John. So it looked like it was going to stall out and then just become maybe a budget bill, but it moved this last week actually, and so it's through rules, it's through a second read. So I think it's going to actually get through, which is great. Then it doesn't just have to be a budget bill. So we'll know probably more. I'll check in with Dunn staff today just to see if they anticipate still it going through, but it just kind of came back to life. Inside baseball was that I guess Dunn ruffled some feathers, and so all his bills were kind of stalled out. He must have smoothed that out, and our bill's now moving again, and just earlier this week. So I'll see, but probably next week, maybe there'll be a vote on it. That's my hope, and it's already through. One side, now it's got to go the other side, and then we also have the governor's support, both for it as a budget bill, or if it, obviously passes, they'll sign it into law as well as the commitment that I received from the governor's office. So we just have to get through that hurdle. Obviously, it is a money bill too, so that's the only other change. The other possibility is that we get less funding, but we'll make adjustments if we have to. But I'm being told by the governor's office, since we're not asking for more funding, we're asking for the same. That's good because most people are always asking for more money. So fingers crossed that the budget's not impacted. But if it is, we'll make adjustments and make sure we still achieve the objectives with less money.
Okay, that's good news. This is a really important program, and I don't want to speak for JJ, but it's really important because there is a sense among many advocacy organizations that the amount of oversight of group homes, especially group homes serving people with complex needs, by the Division of Developmental Disabilities is not as extensive or as rigorous as it needs to be. And so this bill, or this program, which was instituted several years ago, was meant to help remedy that and bring in a true third-party monitoring for these complex needs group homes. And based upon the information that we've seen, the reports that DRAZ has put out, it is absolutely true that the division is not doing as rigorous a job as it needs to do. And DDD has its response to that, but the fact from the advocacy side, I think, is that we would like to see more done, and this program has really spotlighted some things that need greater attention. So glad to hear that it's moving forward.
Yeah, and if I could quickly add, just so that you all know, that the new legislation is not just a continuation of the program, but it's also enhancing it with more reporting, public reporting, that we would provide, that would be put on a state website, and then the state has to provide quarterly responses to our reports, and then they also have to put that on the website. They also have to put our annual reports on the website so that everybody can see kind of, what's going on, what the state's responses are, and what the state is doing to remedy the situations we identify. We also have specifically identified health and safety parts of our monitoring tool. Our monitoring tool will be on the website as well, so parents can see it, the state can see it, providers can see it, and see how robust it is and how much more we're focusing on the health, safety, and well-being of a person, as opposed to just you have a piece of paper in your file. So I think this next go round of the project, and it's not called a pilot project anymore. It is subject to a 5-year sunset clause, but again, we think that that period of time will continue to do good work, and maybe even make it a permanent program where there is an outside agency in this space. And then, just so that you all know, DRAZ is looking at other areas to monitor in a similar fashion to ensure that people are safe and free from abuse and neglect. So I think this go round is even enhanced. You learn a lot. We didn't have a program before like this, except for internal. So this go round, I think that both community will benefit. The community will benefit from the enhanced tool and the enhanced monitoring.
So JJ, this is Kathy. I was wondering, if I were to look at it, would I be able to see that you would say, here's your findings, the state responds, or the agency responds? At some point, will there be words like in compliance, anything like that? Or will it just go back and forth with you say this, they say this? How will, as a parent, will I know that it's okay now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. As it stands now, I don't know if that's going to be the back and forth, right? Or if it's going to be clear enough. But I think at least this go around, the family member side will be able to see what findings we have identified within a particular group home. You won't get to, we're not enforcement. This statute doesn't authorize us to do an enforcement. But what we hope, by identifying that, then the state will have that quarterly report where they respond. And I would hope, again, it's a hope, we'll see how they kind of dance around it, that they not only respond that we've received, but we've also remedied it by implementing this, or we've made this adjustment. So maybe we don't have that compliance term, but you would, openly see the issues identified, and then what the state's doing to address that. So, because we're not using the same tool, right? It's not an audit of the state saying that the state has checked the right boxes. It's an independent review focusing just on the health and safety. So the state's response is because that's what the state keeps trying to put us in and trying to argue against us, is saying, well, we already do that. And our response is, you do something different and not doing it very well either. We need to do something that focuses just on the health, safety, well-being, not just compliance with that you your staff attended the training? Was that training effective to address the behaviors that that person is having in the home? So, I mean, to answer your question, I don't think it's going to say compliant or non-compliant, but I hope that our report's more robust to give families a really good picture of what's going on in that home. And then they can put pressure on the state. If the state says we didn't find it, well, that to me, that's not sufficient. So then I would hope the community would come out and say, that's an insufficient response, or that's not fixing it, or my child continues to be in harm. And then we'll keep improving this. And John knows this. I mean, once you get something in statute, it's a lot easier than to amend or adjust versus, fighting from the outside. So I hope this next go round is better. But as you guys see the tool, I hope that, DDPC, you, Kathy, and others will say, can you also ask this question? Because this is just a minimum. Like, we can enhance our tool and make an adjustment. But this is statutorily just the minimum of what we're supposed to do.
And so I'm not trying to take up everybody's time, but then I'm curious that as the council, what can we do after that's been out there and the state has responded? As a council, I think we should have some responsibility to either, I don't know, make the issue larger or say, no, this is great and we really appreciate DDD doing this. Do you see what I mean? I want to know what our role as a council is to help you with your reports,
Sure. So I'll start with what can help us, and then obviously John, from what your perspective is, the director of the council, is taking our report and then asking follow-up questions. You all supported us this go round to say, what is the state's response? The state finally did respond in writing, but nothing really substantive. But it took, 2 years for them to do that. But I know the council was putting pressure. John was having meetings with Zane Ramadan Garcia. He was giving his kind of verbal response to things, but kind of sharing that information and then saying the council wants more is important. Obviously, the council can't do that. And so we've met with the council. I met with Jason and John and others to kind of strategize exactly about that. Like, how can we put more pressure on the state, but even for the community, like, if you all, now that it's publicly going to be on a state website, I mean, if you want to kind of direct people there so that the community knows, I think that's valuable too, because not everybody knows it's going to be up there, right? But the council has an audience that doesn't always mirror ours exactly. So at a minimum, I think that, and if John and others have strategy, I would support it as long as we're enhancing, the monitoring and keeping it independent. Those are our goals, and I think the council, as John's introduction stated, I think we're aligned in that goal or that pursuit.
So we'll have like a link that we're educating parents, but we'll have a link on our website that just kind of allows them easy access to that. What do you think? I don't know.
I think that's a great idea, and even hosting, like, if you wanted us to now, because it's public, to host, things and really explain our role and further explain what we do and where our tool is and what's different this go round. That would be great. I would like to more publicly announce this. The first go round, like I said, had very limitations on what was supposed to be done. And now that we've kind of lived it and know it, I'm open to even more publication about what's going on, because that was the goal of this new bill. So.
Okay. Thank you.
JJ, I wanted to ask you, because I've got a family that I know that they're really reluctant to complain, but their son is autism, pretty severe, and in a group home has been abused. They've hinted at sexual abuse, not just physical abuse with him. That's pretty bad. And it's their son. And so it's like they're not getting a lot of resolution. So if they're willing to speak or pursue, is DRAS the appropriate place to send them to report that?
Yeah, so for that situation, again, not knowing if that individual is someone we monitored under the commit project.
I don't know.
Yeah, and they might, but I would say to come to DRAZ separate and apart from commit, because commit doesn't have any, like, independent, like if somebody called us and said, my child is being abused, under commit, we couldn't do anything unless they're on our list, right? So we're kind of limited to those with complex needs that the state has identified, and those homes that they've identified where, the individuals live. So if that doesn't match, but DRAZ doesn't have those limits. So if someone is being sexually abused, Asim is our supervisory attorney of our abuse and neglect in investigations team for DRAZ for our federal funds. So yeah, please direct them there and make sure they highlight, exactly what you described so that we know that this is something we have to get out to immediately. It's not just something to monitor, it's potentially something to investigate.
Okay, thank you. And if you're talking about doing educational things down the road, I know Autism Society of Greater Phoenix, they've got a whole lot of families and a lot of families in group homes that are on their boards that are in there. So whatever education moving forward too, to let people know that there is maybe some sort of process or someone will listen. So thank you for answering my question. Thank
Sure,
you.
not a problem.
Okay. I'll leave it at that with regard to the current legislative session, unless there are any other questions. There's a lot of legislation moving through, much more than we thought there would be related to people with or affecting people with disabilities. But as I said, I'll be doing a
Real quick,
kind of a
sorry,
session.
2330 is also a bill. That you might want to talk about it. Was the license disclosure bill?
Oh yeah, we I was involved very early on, and I think Jason's been tracking this pretty closely. There was a bill introduced this year to allow for voluntary self-identification for individuals associated with their driver's licenses or vehicle registrations, so that law enforcement, if they were pulled over, for example, law enforcement could run their computer check and see that the driver or a person in the vehicle is a person with a disability. The wording is not, it doesn't say person with a disability, it says person with a person requiring enhanced communication or person requiring a communication accommodation, something like that. It would not be, there would be no information on the registration document itself or the license itself. It would all be internal to the Department of Transportation website or law enforcement websites and their databases. The bill is moving through. There was some initial opposition from some groups, fearing that it was a way of outing people who have disabilities who don't want to be identified as having a disability. But those concerns, I think, have been put to rest, again, because there will be nothing on the license or the registration itself that shows that self-identification. It's purely within the database. But the hope is that law enforcement, if they see this designation when they run their computer check, then when they approach a vehicle that they've pulled over, they will be better informed and better prepared to interact with the person that they're about to speak with, the driver or a passenger in the vehicle. So this bill, Representative Willoughby, who, by the way, introduced the amendment to the DDD funding bill that was killed by her own chair, the one that probably would have gotten the governor's signature. She introduced this bill and has been working it through. The law enforcement agencies have been in support of it. Department of Public Safety has somewhat begrudgingly at first supported it, but they came around, and plenty of disability advocacy groups have been behind it. So we're very hopeful that that goes through. This is the kind of bill that has been passed in Texas and Florida and several other states, and it's proven to be very effective. There are a number of other states that have been envisioning a bill like this, but haven't quite pushed it through. We based our bill largely on the Texas model, which again has been effective and has not created any problems, has actually helped somewhat. The caveat to all of this is that unless law enforcement officers are provided additional training for working with people with disabilities, especially cognitive disabilities or autism or similar diagnoses, they can only be prepared up to a certain point to interact with them. So in addition to this bill, which we think is a step forward, we are also continuing to advocate for better law enforcement training on an ongoing basis to understand the needs of people with IDD, whether they encounter them as drivers or whether they encounter them in the park or whether they encounter them anywhere else in the community. Programs like Be Safe are really good programs, but they're very expensive and they're limited to small numbers of people. We need to help AD Post, the Peace Officer Standards and Trainings Office, develop better trainings for law enforcement officers across the state on an annual basis so that they are educated and continually receive reinforcement in the education they receive. And we'll continue to do that. But we think 2330 is a good step forward, and we hope that it continues to move. JJ?
Real quick, so in my conversation with Megan from the governor's office yesterday, I know you're reaching out. She not only mentioned kind of a photo op opportunity related to the bill for people, but also mentioned training. And so I said we would obviously and could do it. And I think if the council says either you all could or would find folks to do it, just keep that ball rolling. That, and of course they're always going to say it's money, but this aligns with our priorities. So if you want to say, I know DRAZ can do it for free. I think I said that yesterday to her too. So, I mean, I really think we need to be doing the training as opposed to someone outside of Arizona or outside of the disability community. So if and when you have that call, just a sneak peek that if you bring that up and bring that bill up in the training, I think she'll jump on that or write it down again. So.
Excellent. And it should be pointed out that DRAZ has a history of doing trainings with Pima County Sheriff's Office, I believe, and perhaps
Right.
other law enforcement agencies in Southern Arizona. So there is some expertise there, and we should avail ourselves of that.
All right.
Kathy?
I just want to say one thing. Could we find out why it's successful in Texas? What makes it successful? And the other thing is I always worry about rules that are written for these laws. If there's that, we watch that too. Does that create a program that's very hard to implement once the rules are written? So that's my 2 comments.
Okay. I can tell you from my conversations with the Texas Council Director, basically what's made it successful is kind of what I said before. They're not providing any additional training to their law enforcement officers beyond, kind of what we provide, 8 hours or 4 hours or something during the academy and optional modules on an annual basis. But what they consider to be successful is simply notifying law enforcement in advance before they approach a car that the person they're likely to be speaking to has a communication challenge, needs some kind of needs more patience or needs a different approach or whatever. And so it is perhaps marginally, perhaps incrementally improved the ability of law enforcement and drivers with disabilities to interact with one another. It has certainly cut down, and not like it's revolutionized their system, but it has cut down on the number of adverse outcomes in those interactions. So they consider that to be progress. But they're in the same boat as us, not having the funding, not having the legislative commitment to forcing additional training. So as I said, it's been sort of marginal improvement, but they consider it to be a better situation than it was before.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, moving on to the disability policy seminar last week. Sarah and I from the staff and Kathy and Bianca Demara from the council were in Washington, D.C. for the disability policy seminar. JJ happened to be there coincidentally as part of a NDRN meeting. And so he participated with us on some Capitol Hill visits. There were also 21 other people from Arizona as part of our group. And that's the largest group we've ever had attending DPS. It was, I hope it was educational and informative. Kathy, just to put you on the spot, if you want to say anything now about your experience, it would be wonderful. You're on the agenda for next Friday to share some of your experience with the full council as well. But if you have any comments on it, please feel free.
I first want to thank you for allowing me to attend this conference. This seminar. It was always very rewarding and uplifting. I enjoyed the day on the Hill. I think we made some inroads, but I think we still have a lot of work to do in responding to some of their questions, the staffers' questions. I will tell you, I attended one session, the direct support services professional seminar or breakout session. And it made me think about, because there's such a need for the direct support professionals to have more training. There's a lot of issues still there. They don't understand disabilities. They don't have enough techniques to know how to work with their clients. And I don't think they are being recognized for the hard work of working with the clients. I also think that in an article I just saw out was that caregivers are providing, you know, more services to medically complex individuals. And I think that we need to begin to recognize the hard work that direct support professionals do. I just think that there should be a standard occupation code, as they were saying in the meeting, for DSPs. And so not saying that we should take that on, but I do think it's something that we should support if it comes up in our state. Or but I really enjoyed the conference, and thank you for allowing me to be part of the group to go to the different representatives and senators.
Well, thank you for investing the time in it and making that long trip to a city that is maybe a little less cheery these days than we're normally accustomed to. But I felt it was a good conference, and that our visits on the Hill were valuable. I don't know that they were all quite as productive as we hoped but we don't know yet. I mean, I will say that generally speaking, we were received courteously by offices that historically have often not treated us with a lot of courtesy. There are certain members of our congressional delegation who often, I would say, just sort of disregard the needs of the disability community, or they listen, you know, politely, but just nod their heads a lot, and they don't really care a whole lot. In this case, some of those offices were much more engaged in the conversations, in particular around Medicaid, than they have been in the past. And I think that's a credit to the advocacy that's been done over the last several months and the concern about what's going to happen to Medicaid. Now, where those individuals end up voting, you know, is anybody's guess. And in all likelihood, some of them will continue to vote for the kinds of cuts that are being envisioned, but maybe not. Maybe not. We were able to, there were only 2 offices that did not schedule a meeting with us this year. And in both cases, a group of our attendees went to those offices to leave materials and talk to the people in the reception area, whomever those folks, those staff members may have been. In other cases, we were actually able to meet with, we cornered Juan Ciscomani from District 6 in the hallway outside his office and pinned him down on his stance on Medicaid. We were able to meet with the chiefs of staff of a couple of different offices, and you know, I felt a little bit hopeful coming out of it. I don't know whether it's misplaced hope or not, but I mean, I felt better than I expected coming out of it, and I appreciate the fact that Sarah and Jason put together some fantastic materials for us to take. Under the gun, I think they really managed to get information together. JJ brought some information from DRAV. We had information from the seminar itself related to Medicaid and education and Social Security. And so we had good materials to leave with them. We had enthusiasm from our attendees, most of whom had never been there before. I just feel like it was a worthwhile trip for us, a worthwhile investment of our time and resources to especially at this time with the uncertainties that we're facing.
Yeah. And I thought we worked well as a group. We fed off of each other, and one would say one thing and then the other would add to it. And I enjoyed that conversation. I also think I have a little renewed hope in some of our little staffers, our baby staffers up there, and that hopefully we've planted seeds that will just grow. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Last item on the executive director report is the bylaws update, and the update is that there is no update. You may recall a few months ago we formed an ad hoc committee to work on bylaws updates, and to be completely honest with you, federal and state events have sort of overtaken us, especially around Medicaid and the uncertainties of our status ongoing. So that ad hoc committee has not met, but it will soon. I assure you, we will get a meeting set soon. It just, as much of a priority as our bylaws may be, it seemed to be a little less of a priority than some of the other things we were tackling. So my apologies to those of you who have agreed to serve on that ad hoc committee. But just know that we will get something on the calendar very soon and move forward. That's it. I'm happy to answer any other questions related to those items.
Okay. I don't hear any questions, so thank you, John, for that. And you're not done yet, sir.
I'm
You
not
and Mark.
done.
No. So we're going to move on to agenda item E, status of council funding and operations with John, Marcy, and Lonnie. Right
Okay.
ahead.
I'm actually going to start this with a little bit of good news, because while we've been in this meeting, I have gotten messages from the council directors in Kentucky and Colorado that the P&A, the Protection and Advocacy Agency in those states, have both received their notices of award for the remainder of fiscal year 25, and their funding was level. They got what they were told they would get. So JJ, I hope you're going to get the same. And I hope that's a good indication for what we are going to receive.
Yeah, that's great news. No, I'll check. So you said Kentucky and who else?
Kentucky and Colorado.
Okay, so Kentucky's a state part of the state. So just to give you kind of inside baseball there, so that's distributed through their university, through their state. Sorry, and then Colorado's a private nonprofit. So I'm going to check with Colorado because we're in the same boat. So thanks, John. That's great news.
Yeah, happy to do it. Okay, so now for the more confusing and potentially less optimistic news related to what's going on with HHS and council and USEDS and P&A. I sent out a message a couple of weeks ago regarding reorganization at the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. What we knew then was that HHS was planning to do away with the Administration for Community Living, which is the umbrella for our DD network organizations, or our DD Act organizations. That plan has not changed. ACL, they're in the process essentially of eliminating ACL. And the plan was originally to move the DD Act entities to the Administration for Children and Families, which is another office within HHS, which I believe is where these programs had been housed at one point in history before ACL was created back in 2012, I think it is, 2013. Well, since that time, and in fact, just in the last few days, some additional things have changed. As Lonnie mentioned in her report, we still have not received our notice of award, and we've been told that we should expect something in mid to late May. A bunch of people at HHS who were affiliated with ACL were fired, essentially. They were part of a reduction in force. Subsequently, because someone at HHS realized that they actually couldn't do their business without certain of those people, a number of them were recalled, and they were put to the task of putting together notices of award and various other things. So that was a hopeful sign. Sarah and I, when we were in Washington last week, met with a woman named Jennifer Johnson, who is the administrator for the Administration on Disabilities, another one of those agencies within HHS. And I apologize for all the abbreviations and acronyms and everything, but Jennifer Johnson plays a role in the lives of the USEDS and the P&As and the councils. She's somebody that we look to for guidance and we look to for information. Sarah and I were in a meeting with Jennifer. We went over to HHS to visit Erica McFadden, who works, obviously my predecessor at the council, but who works in the independent living area within ACL. It turns out we had a meeting with Jennifer and David Jones and Jack Brandt, who are program officers for ACL. And Jennifer reiterated to us that we should expect our notices of award in mid to late May. So I asked her if that meant we were going to get level funding, because the continuing resolution was for level federal funding. She said that was their understanding, but they couldn't guarantee it because, as Lonnie mentioned, we don't have budget tables. We don't know exactly what Congress envisioned with their extended continuing resolution. So apologies for all the repetition, but we expect our notices of award by mid to late May, maybe sooner now that the P&As are getting theirs. We do expect level funding, but we don't have a guarantee of that. What we learned this week, and what is sort of troubling about some additional HHS reorganization, is based on a different document that I'm going to show you that leaked to the media on Wednesday. And this document it's what's known as a passback. It is an initial budget outline for every federal department going into federal fiscal year 2026, which starts on October 1st. This is provided by the Office of Management and Budget, which is a White House office, to each federal department, and they are then supposed to respond to this. And this provides some outline of what the White House wants to see happen. So you can see here that part of the plan, of course, was to do away with ACL and to move those programs that were part of ACL, and that includes not only the DDX programs, but aging programs and some nutrition and healthcare programs. Some would be, the aging programs would be moved to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Administration for Children and Families would take on the disability and nutrition programs, and a new entity, and that includes the PNAs and the councils, and a new entity called the Office of Strategy would take on the USEDs. But that's not where it ends, because in addition to moving the organizations would ultimately be eliminated. And this is a list of the organizations that includes councils, PNAs, and USED that are scheduled to be zeroed out on budget lines for federal fiscal year 2026. You can see there are plenty of other programs in here that are scheduled to be zeroed out, including Head Start on a national level, including community economic development, rural community development, various other programs as well. Now, this comes as a bit of a shock. We exist because of federal statute, and that federal statute says the federal government has to fund us all at a minimum level every year. So what's being proposed here is, by most measures, illegal. It can't just happen because the White House or the department says they want it to happen. It requires an act of Congress because we exist by an act of Congress. But I think we all understand that we're living in slightly different times than we're accustomed to. And by the way, the USEDs, you won't see them listed here on the highlighted areas, but the USEDs are listed under that new Office of Strategy, and they are also listed as being zeroed out and eliminated as programs as part of this budget proposal. Now, there's an additional caveat, and that is, as you can see here in the middle paragraph to the right, it says IL increase. The budget proposal is to do away with our programs, but to maintain independent living programs and to enhance the funding for independent living programs. That's the SILCs, the statewide independent living centers, and the CILs, the Centers for Independent Living, like Ability 360 and Direct and Assist to Independence and Smile and Yuma. So the independent living programs would actually see an increase in their funding by $325 million. And as it says here, $325 million above 2024 enacted will go toward the independent living state grants. The grants should provide flexibility to states to use the funding to provide services and supports provided by the disability programs the budget eliminates. So what they are proposing is independent living programs across the country would get an increase in their funding. And with that funding, they would, at their discretion, be allowed to support the DD Act programs and other programs that are eliminated further up in the budget document. It doesn't say they're required to, it says they will have the flexibility to. And what that means, if this were to pass through as it is, that would mean that AZ Silk, for example, would have the opportunity to essentially take under its wing the PNA, the USEDs, and the council to whatever degree it saw fit or to whatever degree it could afford with its additional block grant from the federal government. Am I making sense so far? Okay. And then I just wanted to show you where it says under Office of Strategy, where it says that the University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities would also be eliminated programs. By the way, I'm happy to share this document with anybody who hasn't seen it but would like to see it. It is 64 pages long, 64 pages of pretty depressing news, but I also want to emphasize this is not the final word. As I said earlier, this is a first pass. This is the proposal from the Office of Management and Budget to each department. And, that means transportation and defense and health and human services and housing and urban development and education, every other federal department. They get their own version of this document. The department, Health and Human Services, is now supposed to respond to this, to defend any of the programs that it wants to maintain, to give its assent to eliminate any programs or accept the budgets as presented, and they have a period of time in which to respond to the document. We have been told, our folks at NACDD have contacts within federal government. We've been told by people at ACL, we've been told by a variety of people that this is not the final word, that there will in fact be pushback on this document, on this proposal, and that there will be an attempt to maintain programs that they consider to be very, very important. I would also point out that in addition to the entities, the agencies like DRAZ and the council and the USEDS, some of the programs that we operate would lose their funding. The programs of national significance, for example, our Bridging Aging and Disability Networks grant, our nationwide community of practice, that is considered a project of national significance, and that would lose its funding as part of this as well. So it is distressing to look at, and I can't tell you, I can't tell you the state it puts us in as staff of the council. I'm sure the same is true of the USEDS and the PNA. I'm sure that you all feel the same as council members, because you wouldn't be part of the council if you weren't committed to this work. So to see them sort of wantonly disregard this work and consider it, this and so many other things, to be worthy of just complete dismantling, at the blink of an eye, it's disturbing and it's distressing. But we know that there will be advocacy to respond to this. A number of national organizations are already getting together to put together a response strategy to figure out who we can rely upon on the appropriations committees in Congress to fight back against this. In particular, of course, we are looking at Republicans, because the Republican Party controls both houses of Congress. Juan Ciscomani, I mentioned him earlier, representing District 6 in Arizona. He is on the House Appropriations Committee, so we will be reaching out to him. He is also one of the people with one of the largest Medicaid populations in the state within his district. So we're hitting him on multiple fronts related to key federal issues. There has been a request for us to identify other prominent Republicans in the state, whether they are elected officials or not, but individuals who could perhaps exert their influence with our congressional representatives. There is actually some guidance being provided to us either today or Monday by NACDD and our other collaborator organizations related to what they would like us to provide. Obviously proof of the good work we've done through the grants we've provided and the projects we've been involved in, the impact we've had on the state, but also, as I said, identifying individuals who can potentially be influential in moving this in a different direction. So I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can. I will tell you, we just saw this document Wednesday afternoon, and our folks in DC are doing an awful lot of work on it. I think people around the country are doing an awful lot of work to try and understand what it means and how to respond to it. So there may be things that I can't answer, but I'm happy to take any questions. The long and short of it is basically the budget. This first pass would call for the elimination of the DD Act programs. There will be a legal challenge to that. There will be an administrative challenge to that. But we will continue this fight for whatever period of time it takes and make sure that, let's say, cooler heads prevail. And with that, if you have any questions, please feel free.
You and I, John, met yesterday, so you got my questions answered for now for what you could, but Kathy did raise her hand. She would like to see the pass back OMB. You'd mind sharing that, please? And then I will be quiet for anybody else who may have questions.
Yeah, I'd like to see the document. This is Kathy.
Okay.
First glance, it just makes you want to cry.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and I assure you, you would not be the first. We, JJ, Kelly, JC, and I met yesterday to try and, make sense of this with what limited information we had. All of our organizations clearly have a vested interest in this and will continue to work on it.
Well, whoever
It's
put it
kind of
together
unfathomable.
doesn't understand, like giving it to the Silks. They would have to ramp up to issue any money out, and that I just don't think they have the staff and the expertise, but maybe I just don't know.
But they'd have all the money, Kathy.
I know. But then when you look
Hire
at how
staff.
the money is divvied out to the different Silks, I just don't know if we would get very much money in Arizona. That bothers me too, so.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, we as a staff have had multiple conversations in recent weeks because we hadn't gotten our notice of award and because we had other, concerns moving forward. We'd already started conversations about contingency planning. And so I'll go back to the agenda. Other states are doing exactly what we're doing. They're analyzing their current grants. They're analyzing, what funding they have available and what they're likely to have available. We too are doing that. And so we have some examples actually of some contingency plans that have been put together by other states, and we're kind of figuring out what pieces work for us and what pieces don't, and what we need to envision on our own. ITAC, our Technical Assistance Center, is doing a webinar next week on contingency planning to try and provide some guidance that takes into account what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. For example, we are not allowed to lobby related to the appropriation. We can educate, we can share why councils and P&As and USEDs are important, but we can't ask for a specific dollar amount. We can't ask them, I guess we can't ask them even to appropriate money, although I guess there's some gray area there. But we have to be doing our outreach, and that ITech webinar is going to help inform us on how far we can go. Beyond that, I'm actually going to throw it open to Marcy and Lonnie if they would like to share anything more about what we're looking at. We have sent out a couple of notices to current grantees to prepare renewal requests for the coming year. Those actually went out before we had seen this HHF document, or OMB document actually. So everything we do, of course, there's wording in our contracts that everything is contingent upon the federal funding being available to support the projects. But that, we need to do more to work with our grantees and our contractors so that they're aware of where we stand and what could happen and over what time frame. So anyway, I've talked way too much, but Marcy and Lonnie, if you would like to chime in on what we're doing in the conversations we're having, please do so.
Yeah, I'll just jump in because I know Lonnie spoke to the budget part of it, but at least in the contract side, when we met earlier this week, staff did, to look at the contracts and how we would prioritize anything. This was based on before this release, this leak of the budget, but it was, whether we would get the notice of funding, whether it be level funding, whether it be reduced funding. So we were prioritizing projects. But we do have in all our contracts, under the terms and conditions, the term about availability of funding, that the council could end the contract based on the availability of funding. So we are covered that way if we do need to cancel any contract. So I think before we move forward on contracts, existing contracts, and what we're going to do is outside of the three that we've notified. We notified the ARC of the two contracts and then one contract with NAU to proceed with a renewal, a very brief renewal application to be submitted. We'll hold on to that once it's received, depending on whether we receive anything from the feds on our notice of award for continuation funding through September 30th. Once we know whether we get something, we don't get something, then we're going to have to move forward with figuring out what to do with any of the existing contracts that are potentially up for renewal. We are not issuing out any new solicitations. I have received a lot of community requests from different organizations asking about whether we were going to be issuing out anything new, and we are not. We don't even have anything on our work plan, to be quite honest with you, for new funding, new projects. It was really based on existing contracts. And some of these contracts anyway are ending in June 30th or ending September 30th, and they were scheduled to end anyway. Some of them not as a renewal. So we're in a wait and hold see. You're going to be hearing that a lot from us because of the uncertainty. But you know, we have to wait and see what comes out with this notice of award, at least through September 30th, and then see what sort of pushback the partners in the communities and Congress is going to have in terms of eliminating the DD Act, you know, as a whole, or how they're going to manage that. But to Kathy's point too, I totally agree. The Silks do not have the capacity or the expertise in managing anything regarding the DD Act. And it would be interesting to see what sort of communication or interest they have with Arizona's, but I don't have high hopes for that.
I just have to say one other thing is that, you know, we have to figure out how to house our data that you've worked on for a while now with, you know, that data hub, where we could put it so it'd be safe, so that if reasonable minds come together later on and they put us back together again, if we are dismantled, we have that data someplace so we can go back to it. And also all the manuals and the
so let me just speak to that. Let me just speak to that, because I was part of the opening of the office when the executive order was in place to reestablish. So I have not said this to John because we haven't gotten that far, but in my head, I'm already thinking about how this was going to play out if we have to shut down at any point and, you know, completely dissolve of everything. The data hub specifically is something that I think we need to go and ask Alex Kurse with ASU to store. He has it. He manages it. He's the one that updates it. I think he would be willing to house it wherever long it takes, and that, you know, obviously he doesn't need to do any more work on it because there's no contract in place, but at least it's a placeholder there with ASU, and we would have to make sure that he's in agreement with that.
Yeah.
We don't know whether we would need to enter in any agreement because we wouldn't be an office that would be in place to have an agreement. In terms of everything that we have, contracts, fiscal invoices that Lonnie has, all the documents and resources that we have, anything that we have posted on our website that we do not have a physical document to have, we would need to publish and have a hard copy of.
Yeah.
Everything will need to be archived, and we will work with the Department of Economic Security and the archive office to ensure that everything is archived properly per their standards. We cannot delete anything. We cannot throw anything away. And so this is just an FYI to staff. We will have to really be diligent in documenting what we have, because those have to be documented for the archives office. So we have to list everything, what goes into boxes. And so we will make sure that we will diligently do that and have the time to document and store everything. So it is something that weighs on me, because I know it takes a lot of time to do that. And it's depressing to be quite honest, to think about it. When the office was opened up under the new executive order, and I was one of the initial staff that started, there's somewhere between 60 and 80 boxes delivered that we'd have to go through immediately to determine what this is and what are we looking at and how do we begin to kind of make sense of it. And it was right around the holidays, in addition to doing a PPR that we had no idea we had to do a PPR. So we want to make it more organized, and hopefully we don't have to come to that point, but we know that we need to think about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
There are just an incredible number of kind of unanswerable questions right now. having to do with, operations of the council. I mean, one of the things that I think about, and Lonnie may be able to address this more, is in any given year, we are typically using the prior year's funding to support the projects for that year. So for example, to a large degree right now, we are using fiscal year 24 money to support current projects, and fiscal year 25 money will go toward projects during 2026 because we have this period of performance after we are notified of our award. And Lonnie, please jump in if I'm not explaining this appropriately. But so if we have this award for fiscal year 2025 and the money's been appropriated to us, but we haven't spent it, does that mean even if the program were to be zeroed out in 2026, could we continue to spend that appropriated money during the successive year? There are questions. I'm sorry, Lonnie, you went off mute, so I'm guessing you have something to say.
Oh, no, you're doing fine. Carry on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. There are issues around, how long the office stays in operation. We are all state employees, and so, what is the state willing to do? I have a call with the governor's office this afternoon. I know JJ had a call with the governor's office yesterday. I've got a meeting with Michael Weissart at DES next week. There are all these things that we need to talk about. We need to get out in the open. We need to, entertain, at least, even if the situation never becomes as dire as it possibly could. We need to know what's going to happen as far in advance as possible, just as we need to let our grantees know as far in advance as possible. If there's not going to be funding available, we need to understand what our position is as well. And I have said on a number of occasions, and I will say again today, my primary goal is to make sure that this staff team can stay together, that we can continue to do work. If we have to pull stuff in-house, we'll pull stuff in-house. If we have to eliminate some of the projects that we envision supporting, then that's what we have to do for the time being. But my primary goal is to make sure this entity can stay together. And so we'll do whatever we have to do, and that's all part of our thinking about where we go moving forward. Worst case, I don't even know that we can discuss worst case scenario right now. If the council and the RAZ and the USEDS were to go away, then we will find solution. We will find the best solutions we possibly can, but we're going to do everything we can to fight and make sure that doesn't come to pass.
Well, and at the very least, then the staff should be given priority within DES to find positions within DES.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is not very sunny news to go into an Easter weekend, but it's kind of the reality of where we are right now. We will continue to inform you as we learn more information. We will continue to do our work as outlined in our work plan for as long as we can. Just know that, our attention to some degree may be pulled in the direction of trying to ensure our survival. And that's just a reality for us right now.
Could we add to the agenda for next week? Could we ask for a report out for Voc Rehab? Because I haven't heard anything. I'm just curious, I mean, we're involved with them quite a bit, and yet I haven't heard anything about where they're going or what will happen to them. I don't know if that's appropriate for this council, but it feels like it is.
Go ahead, John.
Melissa, I was just going to ask if that meets with your approval. I'll be happy to add it to the agenda.
Yes, it does. I didn't know if there was anything specific that you're looking for, Kathy, but I'm really curious about the funding for them too. So
I wonder
going
how
on.
it's going to impact. Based on what happens to them, what does it do to our community? And I think as a council, we should know that. So.
Well, I think so too. And, my understanding is that VR funding at the federal level, that's bid under U.S. Department of Ed, which is now probably being moved over to HHS, and what happens with that. Right. Yeah. I'd love to know too, just for the community at large. And as you guys all know, I'm a vendor for Voc Rehab. That's how I make my living, my clients. So,
Well, our families really need to know if they need to prepare for something,
yeah, because on the DD side, they sure do. It seems to me from the people that I've interacted so far with VR that they're just moving ahead forward like full steam ahead. And I'm like,
Hmm.
do you have you had a guarantee that you're going to exist and your funding is going to be there? And nobody can really answer my question. So I think that would be great. It'd be interesting to see if Kristen is able to enlighten us or share
Yeah,
any information.
I think it would be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay. I'll ask Kristen to speak on that. And by the way, the dissolution of ACL complicates that issue because up until the morning the announcement was made several weeks ago that ACL was being dismantled, the intent was for VR and all of the and basically all special education programs to go under the ACL umbrella. And then ACL was taken apart, and we've received no mention about what's going to happen to those programs now. So IDEA and VR, maybe somebody else knows from the work you do, but we have not been given any indication. So let me ask Kristen to be prepared to speak on that.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions related to the OMB document or anything we know about fiscal year 26?
JJ, go right ahead.
Real quick, I did get an email from Kentucky that they did get their notice of awards for all their HHS grants. So I assume they'll slowly be getting out to everyone else. So that director did confirm they got their money and it was level funded. So
Well, thank you.
Good news.
Wow,
Okay.
that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Okay. Got anything else to add, John?
No, I think that's enough bad news for today.
Are you sure about that?
Well, I could find more if you want, but
No,
I'll pass.
I'm teasing.
No, thank
All right.
you. So, yeah, so agenda item E, our full, or F, excuse me, our full council agenda. Yes. So as we look at this, you will see it looks kind of similar today as we go down a little further. We've left under agenda item E on here the status of council funding and operations, 45 minutes in there for discussion. And that really is to hear from council members, to hear feedback, to hear kind of all the rest of that. And somewhere in here as staff feels appropriate, somewhere in this area, we'll put Kristen on here. Hopefully she'll be amenable to speaking because I think it's absolutely appropriate to know. So, okay. Are there any questions on the agenda?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Yeah, you'll notice that there's no presentations on here because we really need to discuss the funding and kind of hear from council members and the reorganization and all this exciting, cheerful stuff. Okay. No comments, no questions. Everybody is just stunned into silence, and I'm right there with you for a change. Okay, so Kelly, go right ahead.
Well, no, I just posted in the chat, take a look at it, because this is from a family that we work with, and it just touches my heart. So it's kind of like good news. We're all doing good stuff. Is
You
kind of my point.
Do you want to read it? Monica's on the phone, and so
Oh,
I don't think
sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
It just, if I can find where I just, from a family member of a child with Navajo Nation for our Growing and Beauty Partnership Project. I believe it was a parent said, I've learned that the activities that are the most easiest and most fun to do, such as singing, listening, reading, laughing, and playing, storytelling, and just talking to my child are the best for child development and support. Doesn't that just touch your heart?
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Anyway.
It does. That's a valuable lesson. That's pretty good feedback right there.
Sorry, I know it's in the middle of everything. I wasn't expecting to. Anyway.
No, but thanks for sharing it. We need a little pick me up in here. So thank you so much for sure on that. Thank you, Kelly. Agenda item G. Does anybody have any announcements they would like to make? We got crickets. Okay. All right. Agenda item 8, call to the public. I don't note any members of the public on here. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. We do hope that you're able to get a little cheer out of this weekend, a little family time, right? And I will
Yeah.
adjourn our meet right at 10:36. I will call our meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Remember
Thank
to
you.
breathe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, everybody. Don, I hope you survived your dentist appointment. You clearly did. So,
Yeah, I did. I did.
okay. Thank you,
I
guys.
appreciate it.
See you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.